الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. Jazakumullah khair, Sheikh Anwar. I'm really honestly honored to have you here on the Western Dawah podcast. This is again a relatively new podcast. The last guest I had was a very close friend of mine, also from Brooklyn. And in this podcast, as we spoke earlier, it's not like any other podcast. We're gonna go down rabbit holes that people are too scared to talk about, and we're gonna go down. We're gonna. I'm gonna say things that, you know, if you didn't know me, you might actually not like me, right? But you know that I'm playing devil's advocate, and you understand where I'm coming from. So inshallah, for all the people who are joining, jazakallah khair. I appreciate it for joining us and your time and everything. I want to make this very, very important disclaimer for those of you who don't know me personally, do not know Sheikh Anwar personally. In this podcast, I specifically will be asking questions that do not represent what I believe. Okay, I am going to be playing devil's advocate, and I will be basically airing out the grievances that I know exist in the Muslim community, but people are too scared to talk about it, or people are too scared to come out of the closet about it, essentially. Alhamdulillah, I've some of my best and closest friends are Palestini, and Masjid al-Aqsa and Palestine is very close to my heart. There are some of my friends who I will trust them with the keys to my house and car are Palestini. So alhamdulillah, I grew up in a predominantly Arab neighborhood in New York City, and I never really had this distinction growing up that, oh, I'm not Arab and you're Arab. That never really hit me until I moved out of New York City. And then I realized, oh, okay, this actually exists in communities. Wow. Um, so to start with, I want to set the tone. Why are we even here to begin with, right? And why are we spending our time talking about this? I'm going to share with you all a video that I saw just today. A friend of mine shared this, and I'm like, bro, you have to send this to me because it's honestly, this was one of the few videos that really, after like just with a few seconds in, I started crying. Like, it's so difficult to watch this. But I want everyone to watch it because I want everyone to understand, the importance of why we're even here. So I'm going to share my screen for 1 sec, and Bismillah, screen 3. Here we go. Okay. Yeah, just watch this video, guys.
ذاك ايش صار معك حبيبي؟ طب انت كنت تحت الركاب؟ طلعوك من تحت الركاب يا عم؟ كنت نايم؟ كنت نايم ولا بتلعب ولا صاحي؟ ليش بتساوي؟ علي صوتك حبيبي. كنت نايم؟ سمعت صوت عالي انفجار؟ كم واحد استشهد من عندكم؟ 4؟ الله يرحمهم يا رب. تعرف انه هذول ان شاء الله في الجنه سبقونا؟ تعرف انه احنا كمان حنسبقهم على الجنه، حنلحقهم على الجنه يا عم؟ عارف؟ امك استشهدت؟ الله يرحمها. تعرف انه بكره راح تستقبلك في الجنه ان شاء الله؟ يا حبيبي؟ عيطي شو قلبك، عيطي. عيطي حبيب قلبي.
SubhanAllah, right? It's a very difficult video to watch. And honestly, I mean, you see this child, his childhood is just stolen from him, right? I mean, he literally is going through some serious trauma. And I think it will take years of counseling for this child to actually recover from what he's going through, right? His childhood was basically stolen from him. Now, you guys will see the reason why there's mass protests around the country. There's mass protests at Ivy League schools. You see Jewish professors, respected professors, getting arrested by the police, right, for protesting for Palestine. You see this, awakening almost, right? But with that, comes the elephant in the room type of questions. With that comes these side thoughts, these, nafsi whispers, right? Specifically for those of us who maybe grew up in conservative Muslim households, and especially for those of us who grew up maybe in non-Arab, non-Arab, non-Palestinian households, right? So I'm just going to first start lightly, Sheikh Anwar. So first I want to ask you, okay, why isn't every MSA member automatically SJP member?
Um, Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man walah ma ba'd. It's a good question. We have to first, I think that the question that we should first ask is, um, why do we have an MSA to begin with, right? Well, SJP is clear, right? The intention is in the title. But the MSAs, a lot of times the intention isn't as clear, right? Just because I call myself Muslim, khalas, that means I'm a member of the MSA. What is our goal? Why are we here? Right? I would be the first automatic question that we should ask ourselves. This is why different MSAs have different looks and they have different qualities, and they take on really the qualities of their members. Um, I know I'm dating myself, but when I was a member of the MSA, it was at the height of the war in Iraq, the invasion of Iraq and of Afghanistan both. And we were in the MSA back then. We made it a point to not be quiet about what was happening. And we made it a point to speak up, even though a lot of MSA members didn't want to. And this is when it was with regards to Afghanistan and Iraq. We attended protests, teach-ins, different events, because we saw that anytime, so if we want to, if so let's say, let's rewind a little bit. People would say, okay, that's political. Okay, very good. We had a dawah table, a weekly dawah table every Wednesday. And we'd have a brother's side and a sister's side, and we'd come and we're giving da'wah to the non-Muslims that were there. Honestly, it was some of the best times because it was teaching us, we didn't really have any formal da'wah training, but it was teaching us how to actually engage with our own faith, right? What are the shubuhat that are being promoted? How can we actually address these? How can we be better Muslims? Every time we did it, honestly, it bettered us as Muslims, right? But every time we did it, a lot of the questions, a majority of the questions were not theological in nature, but were political, meaning the perception of Islam was around the socio-political nature of Muslims and Muslim society and how it's engaging with the world. Terrorism was on the minds of almost everybody. We had to engage with that reality. We can't shy away from it. You can't just simply say, oh, those are the bad Muslims. We're not those ones, right? You actually have to engage, right? What does Islam actually say? What is going on? What is wrong with invading someone else's country? What is wrong with killing innocent civilians? What is wrong with... And so it leads you down, you realize that Islam truly is a universal way of life. It's a what we call a worldview. It is a tool with which to engage the world around us. It's our whole life. It's what we live, eat, and breathe, right? And we can't just segregate it to one side of our lives and say, okay, yeah, we're just going to be apolitical. There's no kind of, delineating line here. So as good Muslims realize that we have to engage, we have to stand up for what's right. And so for us, our MSA was automatically engaging with everything else that was going on. Whereas a lot of, so fast forward, a lot of MSAs, even our own MSA, once, my generation, my class graduated, moved on, you get new people that come into the picture, and many of them feel like, okay, we don't really want to talk about taboo topics. We don't want to really rock the boat. We just want to be accepted. This is going to be more of a social thing. We just want to get to know the other Muslims that are there, etc. That's their prerogative. That's their decision. I believe it's a wrong decision, obviously. But I know where it comes from and why they do that. I mean, I've had, even in my generation, right, in my MSA, not all the Muslims were comfortable. In fact, many Muslim students were told explicitly by their parents, do not join the MSA because we don't want you to go to Guantanamo Bay, right? For those that are too young to know what Guantanamo Bay is, that's where they ship off all the suspected terrorists, right? Remember, almost none of them were ever convicted of actual terrorism. Um, but that's where they ship people off, and it was offshore from America, so that way they don't have rights. And it was terrifying times for a lot of those families. And so the families, in trying to be protective of their kids, would do that. So yeah, that's kind of the mindset and the mentality behind it, right? At least that's one aspect. There's probably more that I'm not thinking of right now, but yeah.
So I'll give you a personal anecdote, right? When I was back in my MSA days, the whole irony of everything was that it was our president was Palestinian. Okay, he's actually a very, very, very dear friend of mine. Um, he himself is Palestinian, right? And I was like the event coordinator, and what we did is we worked. So the university had like the student association, right? Whatever department, they had this food drive or clothes drive or something, right? Where all the student clubs would participate in it. And we did too, right? And what ended up happening is a pro-Israeli club also participated in it, right? Without us knowing. So our SJP at the time went on social media and literally lit us on fire, right? Bashed us, everything, right? And then again, the president's Palestinian, right? He got his face turned red. So after Salah, he's like, Naveed, you have class? I'm like, no. He's like, all right, come with me. And we literally stormed into an SJP event, right? And we're like, all right, talk to us to our face, right? And Imam Anwar, what the event was about? The rights of sex workers. And their guest speaker was a prostitute talking about her experiences and all of this stuff, right? And again, if my president, my friend, and my MSA president wasn't Palestinian, I'd be like, "What is this? Like, what are you guys doing? Right? Are you guys like? Do you guys have any? Do you guys even know the basic ABCs of Islam? And then one of the members I talked to, she again, it was a heated back and forth argument, and I'm like, Palestine is Islamic cause, right? So why are you guys attacking us? She's like, and she, mind you, she's wearing hijab, right? She's wearing hijab and everything. She's like, I never heard in my life that Palestine is Islamic cause. I'm like, what rock do you live under? Right? Like I don't understand. Like, am I delusional here? Like, am I the only one who thinks Masjid Aqsa is Islamic cause? So what are your thoughts about this, Sheikh Anwar? Oh, I'm sorry. Why did it mute you? All right, there we go.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Mhm.
Sorry. Um, yeah, so unfortunately, and this is true to every cause, right?
Right.
Um, some of the people that the cause directly affects, aka the Palestinians themselves, aren't the best representatives of the cause itself, right? And like I said, this is true to any cause. You can literally name the cause and you can find people who are not necessarily good representatives of that cause. That doesn't take away from the cause itself, right? Like, for example, we had Black Lives Matter, and people would point out, oh, look, do they actually deserve it? Look what this, person did. Look at what this person did, etc. Um, it's not, you don't attack the cause because of this, some of the people that the cause affects, right? You look at what are the actual things around the cause. That's number one. Number two, for a lot of Palestinians, they're just like any other society. You have the religious, you have the culturally religious, right? Where a lady, for example, would wear hijab and not really understand why she wears it. And that unfortunately that happens. I was as an imam, and I'm sure you've seen this as well, Naveed, like a family came and they're like, our daughter took off her hijab, once she went to college, we don't know why, all these other things. And I said, okay, I can talk to her, I don't mind. And I talked to the girl, and she's like, I never wore it out of conviction. I wore it because I was under my parents' roof and I have to wear it. Right. And so the parents see compliance as actually agreeing with it, where in fact she never actually agreed with it to begin with. And in some cases, I swear, the girl wears it because she's like, it's easier for me to wear hijab than to do my hair every morning, and it's more fashionable. And I'm just like, okay, like what is this? So, you know what I mean? We a lot of times we're fooled by looks when we shouldn't be fooled by looks.
Mhm.
Obviously, we would encourage everybody to wear hijab and to work on their intentions regardless. Because a trope, of course, a consequence of us saying this is that a person might say, a girl might say, oh, I'm not ready to wear hijab yet because my intentions aren't 100% pure. We would still tell them you should wear it because intentions is an ongoing thing, right? It's never going to be 100%. Like when I go for my salah, are my intentions 100%? I have no idea. If I'm honest with myself, I have no idea, but I still have to pray. So I still work on it. I work on my intentions is an ongoing thing, right? Just as a, I'm just putting that out Islamically speaking, right? So you still have to do what's right, regardless, and you have to work on your intentions before, during, and after. With Palestinians, like I said, you have more secular Palestinians. And when we say secular, a lot of them aren't religious. Some of them, unfortunately, are, one of the more popular Palestinian liberation movements was what we'll call a Jabha Shabiya, right? The Popular Front, the Palestinian Popular Front, I think is the word in English. And they were basically communists. And this was at the height of communism in the 60s and 70s. In fact, they had almost as many members as the PLO, which was not a communist front. Um, what do you think happened to all those communists? From the
Mm,
60s and 70s, right? Those are the
yeah.
parents and the grandparents of today. I've met so many of them who they told me in the 60s and 70s, and even up until the 80s, were completely non-religious. They didn't even know where the masjid was. To them, the liberation of Palestine was like the liberation of any other country in the world, meaning it was a popular anti-colonial, which there's definitely that element, right? We're not divorcing that element. This is the state of Israel, Zionism is a colonial project of the West. Absolutely, I'm agree. This is not a problem. Um, oh, I think we have somebody coming in who's not muted.
Yeah, no, I just muted.
Yeah. Is it Imam Rifat? لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله. No, I'm just kidding.
Out of all people, Sheikh Rifat, come on, man.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah.
Joking.
No, I know. I
Sorry
love it.
about that.
No
No,
worries.
no, you're okay.
For those who don't know,
So
we're all TISA like classmates, so we pick on each other. So
yeah, exactly. It's good. It's good. Alhamdulillah. So anyways, what I was saying is for them now, fast forward, so all those people that were communists, now alhamdulillah, there's been that part of the Islamic awakening movement that started in the 80s right now, and we're still going, it's picking up steam. They're now coming to the masjid. They're now praying 5 times a day. They're engaging with the Islamic part of the movement, realizing that Islam is integral to this, just like it's integral to all facets of our lives. And so there's a slow reformation process. When you understand the history, right, it becomes more understandable. And this is why I think the study of history itself, the history of the struggle, the history of the Muslim Ummah in general, makes it so that these types of problems that we see are not really problems. We actually understand them. We put them in the proper context. So that way, when you see a Muslim lady in hijab saying, wait, Palestine is a religious thing, like there's an Islamic element, you're like, yes, sister. And then you realize, I'm almost positive. I can tell you right now, without knowing who she is, I know her father was probably a member of you know what I mean, that some of those, non-religious movements.
mm.
100%. I mean, because I've met those people, I know who they are, like that type of people.
Finally, I mean, this was really interesting because so from a non-Arab point of view, right? I mean, we're introduced to Palestine because of Masjid Aqsa, right? And
Right.
it's like that's like the Holy Land, and it's where the Prophet ﷺ went to Mi'raj. He led all the prophets. And Palestine's under occupation by a common enemy for over 70 years. So if you're not Palestinian, you automatically, it's like almost like guilt by association, right? Like, people think Saudis automatically are like awliya of Allah, right? It's like, no, they're not. The same thing. I think a lot of non-Arabs, they associate or they expect, and maybe this is unfair, okay? But they, for some reason, expect Palestinians to at least have some level of religiosity, right? Because it's like, you guys, you are holding the Holy Land. Like, you know what I mean? You're from the Holy Land. You're from Masjid Aqsa. We're backing you more because of Masjid Aqsa than your national than anything else, really, right?
Right.
That's how a lot of non-Arabs feel. Um, so I mean, Sheikh Anwar, I think you've jumped right into it. So I'm going to jump right into the really hard questions, because we're already on the topic, right? Now, from a non-Arab's perspective, right? Uh, and again, like I mentioned, alhamdulillah, I grew up in a very big city surrounded by Arabs. Like half my friends, more than half of my friends are Arab, and a good portion of them are Palestini. These are friends that I can call at 3 a.m. They will pick up and they'll be there for me, right?
Yeah.
That's the bond I have with them. However, coming to a smaller town I see with my own eyes, right? Um, the notion that Palestinians don't like us, coming from like non-Arabs, like non-Arab Muslims, right?
Yeah.
Palestinians don't even like us. They look down on us. They're racist, right? They're always ready to fight us. In our own masjid, we had this incident where a young man, his skull was cracked open, literally, over a
Oh,
stupid parking spot, right? And it's like and I had my own experiences too, again, mini road rage after Jum'ah where I was threatened, right? And I'm like, bro, like, do you know, I'm not saying this arrogantly, but I literally put my job on the line to stand up for you guys, and this is how
yeah.
you treat me, right?
Yeah.
um this very video can put my job on the line when this goes on YouTube, right? You know what I mean? You can put us on Canary Mission, and this is how you guys treat me. You know what I mean? um and then people do think, Sheikh Anwar, why should we stand up for them? It's like
Right.
when they're oppressed, there are these people in the videos that we see. But then when they're not oppressed and when they have so much wealth and they have, comfort and everything, they're so hostile. So, what are your thoughts about that? And again, for those who join late, guys, please, these are not, I'm playing devil's advocate in my podcast. These are not my personal beliefs. I'm literally traveling to Sheikh Anwar's community in a few weeks to go, go meet him. These are not my personal stances, but these are the notions that exist in the community that I wish to, talk about, inshallah. So Shakan,
Right.
what your thoughts?
No, no, these are very pertinent questions, right? Um, and I appreciate you putting them out there because there's a lot of different ways to tackle this question, right? Number one. Um, so with that said, I'm just gonna go down a list, right? This is gonna be a long-winded answer to the question itself, which is why should you know what I mean? I'm kind of summarizing your question. Why should I support? I'm not Palestinian. Let's say, obviously, I am. Let's say I'm not Palestinian. Why should I support the Palestinian cause when the Palestinians themselves aren't supporting their cause? They're not good stewards of their own cause, right? I see them, I see how they behave, all these other things. So, number one, we have an Islamic concept that says that you shouldn't do the good for the person, you should be doing it for the sake of Allah, number one. Because sometimes the person you're doing the good for doesn't deserve it. And this is absolutely right, right? So some Palestinians, I'll be the first person to say, are terrible representatives of the Palestinian cause, right? The stories that you were saying, they happen in our own masjid here at MIC in Memphis. Um, we had a guy, because he's driving a fancy car, showed up late to the Taraweeh. Like Taraweeh are over. He didn't even pray Taraweeh. Shows up late. And because people hang out at our masjid, alhamdulillah, the masjid MIC, I think is one of the best massajids in the country. And I'm not just saying this. I actually genuinely believe it. I've traveled all around. We have a lot of programs. We make it into a social environment. There's a lot of things that are going on. So people stay after Taraweeh. This guy literally came because his friends were hanging out after Taraweeh. He didn't even pray. He shows up because he doesn't find any parking. He parks in the Imam parking spot. The Imam had left, okay? And he parks there and gets out. And so they don't know who it was. They're trying to look for the owner of the car. They make some announcements. Nobody's moving it. So then they went back and they watched the video and then they find the person. They followed him in the video, the recording. They see that he just went over to hang out with his friends who are outside in the parking lot. So they send somebody over to him and they tell him, hey, can you move your car? He doesn't move it. We're going to tow it, please move it, etc. So then they tell him, Khalas, we're going to tow it, right? He walks into what we call the command center. And I know this is taking a few minutes to explain, but I'll tell you what
No worries,
happened.
no worries. We have all the time in the
He,
world.
he walks in thinking that he's going to confront people who don't understand him or whatever, and he's very belligerent. Unbeknownst to him, he walked into an unfair situation. Well, not an unfair situation for him. My father was there. So my father is born and raised in Gaza, Palestinian. And he was a volunteer this Ramadan in the EMRT team. So because we have at MIC over 1,500 people coming every night,
Mashallah.
they have an emergency medical response team to deal with emergency situations. And they kind of observe the security. We have a security guard that they communicate with. So he was there in the command center. Almost every night, by the way, they have somebody who fainted, somebody who was tired, somebody whose blood pressure was elevated, whatever it is, and they take care of them, right? My dad jokes and he says he learned, because he's new to a lot of this, he's learning it so that he can go help the people in Gaza and Palestine once he gets, fully certified. He's above the age of 60, and we were talking about this is like something that he just likes to do. The guy walks in and immediately is hostile. My dad stands up, being Palestinian, and he asks the guy, he's like, "Where are you from?" He's like, "Palestine." He's like, "You're Palestinian?" "Yes." And my dad lays into the guy, tells him, "You should be ashamed that you're Palestinian. You're this, you're this, you're this." He put him in his place. The guy thought that he was going to be able to get away with it and threaten and whatever, and kind of that entitlement that I can do whatever I want. Why is this a big deal? I can park, blah, blah, blah. You guys should treat me special. And my dad laid into him, absolutely laid into him. He said, "You should be ashamed of your family. What's your last name?" And he asked him, he's like, "Is this person your cousin? This person your uncle?" And he's like, "Yeah." He's like, "I know them. You should be ashamed to be related to those people, because I know that they wouldn't be doing this." Basically put him in his spot. The guy put his head down, you know what I mean? Got quiet. And then he left quietly. He went, somebody followed him. He took his car and he left. Right?
Wow.
So what I'm saying is sometimes you have to put those people in their place. You can't let them get away with unethical behavior, right? And you have to call them out. And sometimes it takes one of their own to call them out. Yes. And so I'll tell you, I'll be the first person to do this. My dad did it already. So there's no excuse for them to get away with bad behavior. There's something called, and this is point number 3, and Dr. Jones talks about it in TISA. For those who are familiar, Dr. Jimmy Jones, vice president of the Islamic Seminary of America, he has a whole class on the power of prejudice. And in it, he talked about a concept known as the PVEE, right? So that's the post-victimization ethical exception. PVEE, okay? What does it mean? It means that if a person is a victim, right? A person is victimized. So think of like the Palestinians now, right? Or any other society that was victimized in some way. After they were a victim, they feel entitled to an ethical exception, meaning because I was a victim before, now I can get away with certain things that other people can't get away because I'm a victim. And it leads to a sense of entitlement. Okay. Psychologically speaking, it makes them feel like I'm entitled to these types of things. I can get away with things that other people can't because I'm a victim. And I've been told my whole life that I'm a victim. Palestinians know that they're victims. They've lived through it, etc. But some of these people, some of these kids, I want to say, are actually second generation victims. They're not victims directly themselves, but they've been told about the victimization by their parents, their grandparents, etc. They never actually went through with it, but they still carry the PVEE, which is that post-victimization ethical exception. By the way, a lot of Israelis have this mentality. A lot of Zionists have this mindset as well. Oh, we went through the Holocaust, and therefore that entitles us to certain behaviors that other people, we know that other people can't get away with, but because we went through it ourselves, we can actually, there's an ethical exception for us. Unfortunately, and this applies to a lot of different victimized societies, right? Palestinians unfortunately have this mindset, some Palestinians, not all, that they are entitled. And this sense of entitlement is terrible. They don't realize that you have an obligation to be a steward of your cause. You're not allowed to get away with bad behavior. And so, by the way, this also shows that they know that it's terrible behavior. They know that it's not right. They know all these things. And like you said, they don't realize that it comes from a place of entitlement. So we have to call them out on their behavior. But like I said, ultimately speaking, it doesn't preclude us from supporting the overall cause because we do it regardless. And so, inshallah ta'ala, hopefully, the amount of entitled Palestinians is growing less and less every day, right? A lot of them need therapy and sometimes generational therapy in the sense to get over this. Because here's the thing, where does this come from, by the way? If you think about it, Palestinian society is very fragmented, meaning a lot of Palestinians grew up in refugee camps before they came to the United States. If you don't know, growing up in a refugee camp is a terrible place to grow up, right? It's impoverished. There's that scarcity mindset. There's it's me and my family, my clan against the world. Hence, when they come now to the United States where things are relaxed, they still have that tribal clan-like mindset of I'm always ready to fight. I'm always ready to defend me and my people. It's like me and my family against the world. Even and they don't realize like, yeah, we're not we're not in a tribal society anymore. We're not in a refugee camp anymore. Yeah, you can relax. I'm a Muslim just like you are. You know, the other day we buried a Palestinian guy who unfortunately was shot and killed here in Memphis, Tennessee. And he was
Wow.
shot and killed targeted, meaning the people that killed him, actually, we saw the security footage, they went and targeted him personally.
Wow.
Um, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy upon him. We buried him.
Mm.
What's interesting is that some of the people that came to the janazah, this is the first time we're seeing some of these people, right? Palestinians in the community, meaning they don't really attend the masjid, they don't really this. And they're looking at the graveyard. This is the first time that they're in the graveyard. And one of the people's first question was, oh, mashallah, this whole graveyard is for Palestinians? I'm like, uh,
What a thing to be proud about, right?
yeah, and I'm like, no, no, no. We're in a Muslim society. This is a Muslim graveyard. Oh, it's for the Muslims. Okay, okay, yeah. Like in his mind, the only people that he cares about are Palestinians. And I'm like, yeah, this. You need to get that out of your mind. But that's what we're dealing with. You know what I mean? Like, unfortunately, they have that scarcity, that always fighting mindset to where
Mm.
it becomes very tribal, right? And that's a reflection. Now, of course, he's new in the, like, I'm not saying that he's been here. I don't think he's been here for that long. When I
Mm.
asked, he's only been in the United States for like a few months, but he's still coming from that mindset of, you know what I mean? Like, oh, there's a broader Muslim society. Oh, there's a this, there's a that.
Mhm.
Um, you know what I mean? There's a world beyond my little existence. So we have to kind of, I'm not saying to excuse their bad behavior,
Mhm.
but at least to understand where that behavior is coming from,
Right.
right? We do
Right.
have to call it out, by the way, but there's an underlying like psychological thing going on, right?
Right.
And that's definitely there. And once you understand that, once you understand like what, like I said, many Palestinians, some Palestinians grew up in the West Bank, some in Gaza, some in refugee camps spread out all around the world. Some left early on. And so Palestinian society is very fragmented. Some have never visited Palestine, but they're Palestinian. Some have visited a lot. Some have, so you have that mix, right? The
Mhm.
people that are from Gaza specifically. So all these videos that we see of the youth or even the elderly that are living in Gaza itself, right? You'll see their mindset very different than the Palestinians that have been living here for majority of their life,
Mhm.
right? Why?
Absolutely.
It's because they're products of their environment. Just because I'm Palestini doesn't automatically make me one thing. Palestinian society is very fragmented, like I said, and it's by design in some ways because divide and conquer. But we're a diaspora. We're spread out all over the world. But the
Mhm.
people who've been in Gaza, think about this. They've been under a siege for 18 years, right? They've seen, this is not the first war that they see. This is the worst war by far. This is a genocide. This is not even a war. But they've seen many wars before this. So it's as if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has been preparing them for this very moment. And so this is why you see the resilience, the patience. Yahi, these people are truly the people of Gaza, right? That we see are the true models of what Palestinian society has to offer.
Mhm.
They
Right.
are, without a doubt. And you see this, and it's because they've been trialed by fire, right? The fire shaped them into who they are now.
Right.
Contrast that with an entitled youth who's 20 years old. He's never seen the difficulty. He hears about it, but he has that entitlement that, yes, I'm Palestinian. I deserve certain, you know what I mean, whatever. I've been, a victim. My parents are a victim, etc. But he's not I mean, in essence, like you said, he's wealthy. His parents are business owners. You know what I mean? He's been living a posh lifestyle. He's not
Mhm.
the best representative. Now, of course, there are exceptions to this. There are many Palestinians that are extremely religious, extremely well behaved, extremely, you know what I mean, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm saying this as a Palestinian, not to throw my people under the bus, but I'm calling them out for them to be better. Right? As a Palestinian, I want my people to be better. I want my people to be true representatives of what it is to represent a cause. Yahi Palestine, I'll tell you this, Palestine itself is special for many reasons, right? Number one, and I want it to be special because of the people that are there, because of the people that are Palestinian, and I want it to be special because of that. But it's special because of Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. It's special because of Dajjal, the Antichrist, the false Messiah. Where will he be defeated? in
Palestine.
Palestine.
Right.
He'll be defeated in Palestine. And he's the worst, by the way, the Prophet ﷺ has said he's the worst fitna to ever come to this earth by the time he comes, right? Hopefully it's far away. We don't know. You know what I mean? There's a lot of indications that it might be sooner than later, but we hope that it's far off. But there hasn't been a single prophet or messenger except that he warned his people about a Dajjal, and we know that a Dajjal is defeated in Palestine. Ya'juj and Ma'juj, one of the worst trials of humanity, right? When people, the only thing that helps them is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they're defeated, their end is in Palestine, right?
Oh,
The Crusades, the Salibiyin, their end was in Palestine. They were defeated. The worst defeat was in Palestine at the hands of Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi. The Mongols, at Tatar, there was arguably no bigger blow of defeat that happened to the Muslim Ummah than what happened with the Tatar when they attacked, and their defeat was in Palestine. It was Ain Jalut, right, with Saifuddin Qutuz and all those others. Palestine is special. It's Ard Mubarakah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed the land because it says, Alladhi barakna hawla, meaning the land of Palestine itself that surrounds all of it is Mubarakah, and it is. It has barakah. There is something special about it because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decreed it as such, which means there's an added responsibility for us as Palestinians to understand this. And alhamdulillah, I'll tell you, the Palestinians of Gaza and the West Bank, the people who've lived there, who've been under occupation, who've been daily dealing with the struggle, they are amazing examples of the struggle, and they'll show you that humanity that's there, right? And so we should never judge the cause necessarily by anecdotes or the people that we know of, but we should always judge it by that it's a cause that's for the entire ummah. It's not just because, oh, I'm Palestinian by blood and therefore, you know what I mean? It's for the entire ummah. Like you said, in fact, I will tell you, the onus of responsibility for liberating al-Masjid al-Aqsa starts with the people around it and continues to move on, but it's for the entire ummah. It's fard kifaya. So if a group of the ummah doesn't do it, the whole ummah is in sin. If we're not working towards liberating al-Masjid al-Aqsa, which means it should be on the radar of every single conscientious Muslim who believes in Allah and His Messenger and reads the Quran and understands what this entails. So that was a long-winded answer to kind of
no, mashallah, you hit on actually you answered a couple of questions. I mean, subhanAllah, even myself growing up around Palestinians, I never really kind of got this background, right? I never really got this, I always, it always seems paradoxical, right? See, on one end, like you mentioned, there are people from Palestine who are like the best people you meet. Like their generosity literally like makes you blush, right? They're or they're just zeal for the deen. It almost seems fake. It's like you're too good to be true, man. Like how can you be so zealous about your faith? It's like wow. I The friend I talked to, who is the president of MSA, Michelle, he comes from a wealthy family. He was driving a Benz while in college, right? He gave everything up to move to Turkey to go study with Sheikh. Everything. I'm like, that level of Zohud, I don't have. I'll just be honest with you. Like on my free time, I check out like cars for fun. You know what I mean? But this guy literally gave up everything, right? So that's like the level of commitment that I see. And then, even some of the shuyukh that, with Al Maghrib that we learned under like Sheikh Omar Suleiman, this guy's a legend. MashaAllah, may Allah preserve him, right? Sheikh Hassan Rajaz,
yeah.
Sheikh Anwar yourself, right? I mean, everyone at TSA, we all look up to you.
Allah yabarak.
There's countless examples. Every single masjid has that one Palestinian uncle who's like there at Fajr, they're doing all the work, they're cleaning the bathroom, they're collecting the donation, and it's just like these guys, their iman is made of steel. And then on the other end, you have people like DJ Khaled. It's like it's like, you know what I mean? It's like so paradoxical, right?
Yeah.
And for a non-Arab to see that, it just seems it's confusing. Just to be honest with you, it's confusing. It's like I don't understand what's going on here. There's like no middle ground here. But with the background you gave, it makes a lot of sense, right? And I think it's important for conservative non-Arab Muslims to, be a little compassionate, be a little easygoing, be like understand that it's really the youth. I'll be honest with you. It's not the elders. It's really the youth, the new generation, right? Ironically, a lot of them, their dads are like board members in masajids and doing great work and everything, but then their kids are just like, Allah musta'an, I don't know what happened to you, right?
Yeah.
But like, you, I think we should go out of our way, right, as non-Arab, practicing Muslims, to make these youth feel comfortable and welcomed, right? I have a lot of experience with this, right? Where I go out of my way, give salam to like a Palestinian youth, and I'm met with like a dirty stare and with like a dirty look, or like next time they see me, they'll avoid me, and I'm just like, it's off-putting, but I understand where it's coming from. Like you mentioned, right? A lot of them, or not them, but their parents or grandparents grew up in, camps, and they still carry that mindset, right? But Imam Anwar, I mean, on this note, how do you feel as a Palestini sheikh activist? You know, does it, yeah, okay, like with Desis, right? There's an influx of Desi sheikh. There's an influx every restaurant you go, right? There's just this influx of Desis everywhere, right? But then, does it feel lonely, or does it feel a little like I'm by myself, right? Being a Palestini sheikh, being like you mentioned, the practicing Palestinians, right? Do they feel like they're almost all alone? Do they feel like almost like they're marginalized in Palestinian society?
Um, no, to be honest, I'll tell you, there are plenty of religious Palestinians, alhamdulillah, now. Um, uh, the religious, um, I want to say aspect, alhamdulillah, has been, um, good in the sense that there are, um, we're part of the movement called the Sahwa, right? The awakening. And so there have been plenty of brothers and sisters, families that have been slowly becoming more religious, as time progressed. And so it hasn't been, now, of course, I can't compare my experience with someone else's, like in New York and these larger areas. Larger cities tend to attract a lot of Palestinians. But like I said, Palestinians are there's a whole spectrum of leanings and whatnot, even in our own community, right? You have completely secular, if not outright atheist Palestinians, dare I say, just like you have in any other society, right? In Pakistani culture, I'm sure this is true as well.
Oh yeah,
You have
100%.
Pakistanis that are completely
100%.
secular and
Yeah.
some that are completely religious. In
Hmm.
Palestinian society, it's exactly the same. We're under the microscope because of the Palestinian issue being at the forefront of things. Absolutely,
Mm.
right?
Makes sense,
And
right?
once you're under the microscope, you're going to get analyzed and scrutinized, and all these things are going to happen. It's
Right.
very telling though when you become under the microscope how things shape up. Same thing happens with Saudi Arabian society, like you brought up Saudi Arabia before. It's always surprising to people to find out that there are secular Saudi Arabians. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Where they're not really that religious, and you're like, what? But you live in Mecca and Medina, and he's like, yeah, so what? You know what I mean? Like, to him, this is just where he happened to grow up. It's not anything special.
Hmm.
And when we hear that, we're like, wait, what are you talking about? This is totally special, right? This is Mecca and Medina. What are you talking about?
We
And
spent
it's what's
thousands of dollars to go there.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So it's kind of foreign to us to really, but when you think about it, it kind of makes sense. So it's the same thing here, that you'll have a spectrum of Palestinians. You have Palestinians that are very upright and very cordial and very religious, like I say. So I don't find, of course, it's always jarring to see Palestinians who are not necessarily religious, but I know the history behind it, right?
Hmm.
Unfortunately, was part of that whole colonial movement. Remember, colonialism did more damage psychologically than it ever did physically. It convinced a lot of Muslims across the world, not just Palestinians, that the reason why you're behind is because of your Islam. And if you want to catch up to us, you have to do what we're doing, meaning as the West. Even though I don't agree with that whole dichotomy that there's something different between the West and Islam, right? Islam saved the West. Islam is the West, essentially,
Right.
right? But if we look at what by the West, we're talking about Europeans, and European society, then people had to shed their Islamic identity and adopt European values, principles, customs, etc. in order to become better. And then they realized that no, that's not the answer either. Islam always had the solution, right? This is why when that one Muslim scholar came to the West, right? He came to Europe and he said, I saw an Islam without Muslims. And when I came back to my home country, I saw Muslims without Islam, right? Because he saw the values that were being perpetrated, etc. So essentially we were sold a false illusion of goods, and we bought it wholesale, and a lot of Palestinians did as well, and so they became very secular in nature and whatnot, and we're slowly getting out of that. What holds Palestinians back is that to this day we're still very um partisan in nature. So there's different factions, and all of these were meant to fill vacuums, and there's a reason why they came about, etc. When we let these factions divide us, it's at our own detriment. And when we let them unite us, it makes us stronger. And if you look right now, the resistance, for example, in Gaza and Gaza Strip, is actually multi-factional. It's not one faction over the other. They're actually cooperating. They're using, you know what I mean? They're enmeshed. And not just in resisting, but in actually helping the Gazans themselves manage their lives, since their whole lives have been upended. And it's a beautiful thing to witness. People are putting aside their partisanship to work for a greater good, and that's what we should be doing across the board as Muslims, I'm saying. So, to answer your question, do I feel lonely? Absolutely not. And alhamdulillah, there are more and more, not just, you know what I mean, like you see a lot of non-Muslims embracing Islam because of what's happening in Gaza. I can tell you a lot of Palestinians themselves have been becoming more religious as a result. I went down to Florida. I gave a khutbah there at a masjid that I haven't given the khutbah there in a long time. And I went, and in the khutbah, I was talking about this obligation of da'wah from within the paradigm of what's going on in Palestine and Palestine, right? And I mentioned how so I work with an organization called IERA. We've been inundated with people accepting Islam because of Gaza. And this has been happening across the board, right? People embracing Islam, not just the ones that you see on social media. I'm telling you, it's just happening every day that we're getting new shahadas because of them seeing what's happening in Palestine, and then they explore Islam, they see that it's the truth, and they embrace it. So I had said this in my khutbah. After the khutbah, 4 young Palestinian youth come up to me, 4, and they were Palestinians because they had talked to me in Arabic, and I asked them, where are you guys from? One was like, this town, this town, this town. And the first guy who come and talked to me, he's like, Sheikh, this is right before Ramadan, by the way. He said, Sheikh, I've been in America for 2 years. I came here to study to the university. He's like, the moment I landed, I became a lost person. I went out and did basically everything that you can imagine. And he says, this today happened to be my first time in a masjid since I arrived in America. This is my first Jum'ah since I arrived. And I've been here for 2 years now. I didn't even know where the masjid was. And I said, what happened? He said, Sheikh, you remember how you said because of Gaza and Palestine, what happened? Those people were converting to Islam. He says, Sheikh, 2 weeks ago, I was watching videos on my phone of what's happening in Palestine. And he says, I had a hard look in the mirror, right? Not the physical mirror, but just him thinking about himself. He's like, what the hell am I doing? Like, if these people are suffering in this way, what am I doing for them? What the hell am I doing with my life? What am I doing here? And he says, Wallah, I threw my phone, I broke it. I didn't want to break it, but it broke. I went and I took a shower, ghusl, because it says, I have no idea when was the last time I aslan, like, it was that bad. And it says, I prayed and I fell into sujood. He says, Shaykh, I cried. I didn't want to raise my head from sujood. He's like, when I came back from back home, I used to pray regularly with my family and friends, but it was never conscientious. I was doing it out of habit. Everybody else is praying. But he says, for the first time, I prayed because I wanted to pray. He says, it's such a different feeling. And it's like, I didn't even know where the masjid was. We had to ask around and I found it. And this is my first Jum'ah back. Literally, when Ramadan happened, he texted me. He's like, when is Ramadan starting? Because I have no idea. How does it work for America? I was like, oh my gosh. So I was texting him, even though I'm not in Florida, you know what I mean? Like, because I took his number, I told him I want to keep up with him, etc. Him and those guys. And he fasted Ramadan. He was going to Taraweeh. He flipped his life 180 degrees because of what's happening in Palestine. And he's a Palestinian. So alhamdulillah, it's happening more and more. People are waking up. Like, things can't go back to the status quo like they were before.
Definitely.
in so many ways of people's lives, right? So this is just a part of what's happening, and inshallah.
I don't know. I mean, this reminds me, I had the same exact conversation with he's an uncle in our masjid. Actually, again, comes to show how beautiful the practicing Palestinians are, right? When I first moved to Buffalo, he was the first person to give me salam. He gave me his phone number and he offered me a job. I was like, whoa, right? Three birds in one stone, right? And he's Palestinian.
You were making the dua of Musa alayhi salam, right? You know, قم ما
Literally,
نزلت إلي من خير فقير.
literally, right? Subhanallah. And I talk, because everything that's going on, every time I see him and I have a minute, I like asking him, how are your relatives doing and everything. And he brought it up. He's like, what happened after October 7th? He's like, the first time in my life, he's the uncle, first time in my life, I'm seeing so many Palestinians becoming practicing Muslims. And I'm like,
Wow.
this is amazing. And I was like, wow, subhanAllah, right? And coming from a Palestinian uncle, right? So there's no like racial bias here, right? Um, and what you mentioned, Sheikh Anwar, is 100% true. I mean, like this past Ramadan, my own masjid, right?
Yeah.
I personally intentionally have been scouting out the Palestinian youth, right? Because I know what you just mentioned. A lot of them are now coming to the masjid, and I want them to feel welcome. And I want to break that barrier that's drilled into them by whoever, right? That the Desis are like, they don't like you. That's not true, right? We love Palestine, right? It's the other way around usually, but um so and I noticed it like usually they stick together, at least in my community, right? So that you have like a whole row, like there's a whole row in the mesh that's like Palestine, basically, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
um and with that, the last question I'm going to ask you is, I see that, you see that, everyone sees that. What can we do to make sure these youth, these Palestinian youth who are coming now to the masjid, we keep them? What do we do to prevent them from reverting back to, how they were before? What can we do to get rid of that, whatever's drilled in their mind, right? That made them act the way that they act before, right?
Yeah.
What can we do? What are some action items that, whether you're a leader in the community, or whether you just attend Salah, right? What can you do to bring these youth in, right, and make them feel part of the community and make them feel like, yeah, this is the Muslim community, right?
Yeah.
What are things that we can do?
Yeah, obviously, like it's not just for this advice is for all the youth, right? Not just Palestinian youth, but especially Palestinian youth. Um, just because they haven't added, I think, you know what I mean, the what am I thinking of? There's a responsibility on them. They're in the news, etc., right?
Mm-hmm.
What can we do for them? Um, it's a very good question. So, first off, I would call them out when necessary. Don't be afraid to call out bad behavior. In the sense that if there's something that's wrong, we have to talk about it. We can't hide it under the rug. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of Palestinians you'll know are confrontational in nature. Some of them are non-confrontational. That's me. But some of them are going to be more confrontational because of just because of their upbringing and kind of the family dynamics that they had and they grew up with.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. Um, but it's something definitely to not shy away from, right? Ad-dinun nasiha, when we say the religion is by giving good advice, right? Islam is by always giving that good advice. So how can I give proper good advice for people? Sometimes it's being gentle, sometimes it's talking to them in private, which is necessary. You know what I mean? Talking to them frankly, giving them, showing them that love, that whatever. And sometimes it's calling them out. You know what I mean? Like man ahabba falyuqsi ahyanan. Abu Bakr Siddiq radhiyallahu anhu, he says this. He says if you love, sometimes you have to be harsh with the one that you love, right? You can't let them get away with, we can't always be nice and gentle. Sometimes we're going to be a little, and the Prophet ﷺ did this, right? He wasn't afraid of calling out bad behavior when necessary.
Mm-hmm.
So these are some of the things that I think we need to do. Another thing is that I think sometimes in the masajid, um, we fall into that trap of saying, oh, the Palestinians here are not engaged in the masjid. They don't really come. There's only one or two Palestinian uncles that come, and the rest are non-religious. So therefore, we're not going to talk about Palestine. We're not going to bring it up. We're not going to give khutbas about it. We're not going to even make dua for it. We're going to just brush it under the rug. And so the Palestinians naturally would feel unwelcome. They're like, what? The masjid isn't doing anything for Palestine? Why? Are they do not like us? Are they racist? Or, of course, they're taking it personally when it's about the concept. But you know what I mean? They're like, why is this happening?
Mhm.
Unfortunately, this happens. There's many masajid where they don't want to talk about Palestine for whatever reason. Sometimes it's because they fear, like you said, retribution. They don't
Mhm.
want to be blacklisted. They don't want. I mean, in reality, Aslan, you're as a Muslim, you don't realize like these people don't analyze you to that degree. Whether oh, this is a Muslim who talks about Palestine and this isn't. Guess what? We're all in this together now, whether we like it or not, and we have to engage with this topic. And the topic of Palestine isn't pertinent just to the Palestinians, it's for all Muslims. And until we really embrace that idea, we're not going to get ahead. And it's very sad to me when I see masajid that really haven't discussed it. They've kind of brushed it under the rug,
Mhm.
all these other things. There was a masjid, I'll tell you, you're going to laugh at this story because this story really combines all of these stereotypes in one.
Mhm.
There's a masjid that shall not be named just because I I don't want to put them on
Look, we don't
blast.
need you to get banned. Don't worry. It's
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. Where they invited a guest speaker who was Bengali,
Mhm.
right? Now he had requested he works with like some charitable organization, and he requested a fundraiser at the masjid 6 months ago. And when he came was at the end of October. So it was at the height of the current genocide. It was still fresh, right? It had only been going on for a few weeks.
Mhm.
He comes into the masjid, and for the first 15 minutes, the only thing that he's talking about was sadaqah and the importance of sadaqah. In his accent, heavy accent, Miskeen, his English wasn't too well, anyways, because he wants to raise money for orphans, right? Overseas in Bangladesh. I don't blame him. That's a completely fine cause.
Mhm.
He's about to finish his khutbah, and he still hasn't mentioned a word about Palestine or what's happening in Palestine. Okay?
Mhm.
A few Palestinian brothers get up. Okay, they get up in the middle of the khutbah. This is Jum'ah. This is not a lecture. This is Jum'ah. And they start yelling at the khatib, Shaykh, when are you going to talk about Palestine? When are you going to make dua for them? When are you going to do this? Nothing. The guy gets shocked. He ignores them, continues on. It got so bad that he got pulled down from the minbar.
Wow.
Okay,
SubhanAllah.
because they told him like say something, do something, etc. The board got up and they're telling the sheikh, okay, go back up, it's okay, just go back up and just make dua for Palestine, you know what I mean, and ignore. And you know what the guy said? He's like, no, I'm not going to make dua for Palestine, they don't deserve it.
Wow. SubhanAllah.
Okay, why? He's like, yeah, if you guys are offending me like this and this and this, he got offended. He he was upset. And because he didn't want to get back on the minbar, they just made the iqamah right then and there, and the guy led salah and the Jum'ah was over. Okay, it was cut short, it was cut early, there was commotion, people were yelling, it was a mess. Okay, you had Palestinians in their overzealousness, um, wanting every khutbah to be about Palestine. Okay, I understand. You know what I mean? Like, you're hurt, you're this. Not everything is going to be about Palestine, but it's important. Obviously, we need to talk about it.
Mhm.
But then you have on the opposite extreme this guy refusing to even acknowledge or even to make dua for them, and he says they don't deserve it. And that's also another pitfall of shaitan, to where Aslan, we're not talking about Palestine because Palestinians deserve it or don't deserve it, right? We're talking about it because this is a responsibility of the ummah, right?
Right.
It's the same thing like when a wife comes and she's like, I don't want to forgive my husband. I say, you don't have to forgive him, right? You don't forgive because he deserves it. To be honest, most of the time he doesn't. You forgive him because you want Allah to forgive you as well. You do it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not because, by the way, nobody actually, like, if somebody wronged you, do they deserve forgiveness? I can never, in a clear conscience, tell you ever that a person deserves your forgiveness, right? But when you forgive, you do it for the sake of Allah,
Mhm.
right? And this is what the
Right.
Quran teaches us. So we don't do good because the other person deserves it. Like a person says, oh, I don't want to give this person charity. I don't think they deserve it. Yeah, you're not the judge. You don't know whether they deserve it or not. You give the charity because you want Allah to reward you.
Mhm.
Don't Don't judge it. Okay, this person made bad decisions. So did I. So did you. If you think about it in your life, you're not perfect. If you think
Right.
you are, we have a whole nother issue to discuss, brother.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But like,
Right.
you don't give because a person deserves. You don't do good because the person deserves. We need to get over that. You do it because it's the right thing to do. Full stop. End of story. So may Allah help us and guide us.
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh Anwar. We're on the hour. SubhanAllah, I wish we can go I wish we can go on and on. I mean, this was a very, very insightful podcast. I mean, Jazakallah khair. I think really I think we achieved the goal that I had in mind for the podcast. I think you really gave a very good background, a very good just explanation, right, for why we see some of the things that we see in our communities, right? And why perhaps some non-Arab Muslims, right, they might feel this sense of like, um, you know, Palestinians don't even like me, right? Why should I sign up for them, right? But now I think you've explained
I
it.
love you. By the way, if you're thinking this, I want you to know right now that I love you all for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? As a
Wow.
Palestini, this is the case. I can tell you right now, and I can tell you, wallah, by talking to my family members. I know I'm cutting you off here just for a second.
Yeah, go ahead.
Wallah, my family in Gaza, right? The ones who are under the fire still, they refuse to leave, by the way. My uncle Anis, he's refusing to leave Gaza. He doesn't want to, even though we've put his name, we have applied, we did everything. He's like, "La, I don't want to leave," right? I can tell you right now, though, he appreciates the support that the entire Ummah has put forth. And you can guarantee that he's making dua for every single person out there who's supporting the Palestinian cause. I know this for a fact because his print, you know what I mean? The people that are there under the fire in Gaza and Palestine and in the West Bank, and these people are on a different, completely different level. And wallahi, I know they would kiss every single person in the Muslim Ummah, kiss like Palestinian kiss, right? Because we kiss on the right and the left, which
Right.
confuses people when we greet each other.
Right. Bro,
But
this
that's
is
what I'm saying.
Eid,
Like
basically.
it's that mindset. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
Alhamdulillah, you have that. So I can tell you that right now. You're loved, you're appreciated. Wallahi, we're making dua for you.
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh Anwar. Speaking of dua, inshallah, I would love for us to end with if you can make some dua, inshallah, specifically, of course, for Gaza and its people.
Ameen.
Um, go ahead, inshallah. Any
آمين.
dua you
ربنا
have.
لك الحمد كما ينبغي لجلال وجهك وعظيم سلطانك لك الحمد في الأولى والآخرة ولك الحمد حتى ترضى ولك الحمد بعد الرضا ولك الحمد إذا رضيت اللهم لك الحمد حمدا طيبا كثيرا مباركا فيه كما تحب وترضى يا رب العالمين اللهم ألف بين قلوبنا اللهم ألف بين قلوبنا اللهم اجعل تجمعنا هذا تجمعا مرحوما مغفورا واجعل تفرقنا من بعد تفرقا معصوما ولا تجعل فيننا ولا بيننا شقيا ولا محروما. Oh Allah, we ask you that you unite our hearts. We ask you
Ameen.
that you are worthy of praise, that you unite our hearts upon that which is the truth, regardless of how we feel about it. We ask you that we are stewards of justice and of compassion for this entire ummah and for the world, Ya Rabbil Alameen, and that we stand up for justice even if it's against our own brothers and sisters. We ask you that you help and assist the people of Palestine, the people of Gaza, Ya Rabbil Alameen, that you send upon them your barakat, your rahamat, your mercy and your forgiveness and your compassion, and that you aid them from ways that they never anticipated, Ya Rabbil Alameen. We ask you that you bring your victory soon for the people of Palestine and for this entire Ummah, Ya Rabbil Alameen, that you aid in its awakening and that you guide all of its youth and that you guide us and that you guide with us and you guide through us, Ya Rabbil Alameen. We ask you that you forgive us for any shortcomings or sins. We ask you that you forgive our parents and our teachers and everyone who has a favor upon us, Ya Rabbil Alameen. We ask you that you reunite us with our loved ones in Jannat and Na'im.
Ameen.
وصلى اللهم وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين.
Ameen. Ameen. Ya Rabbil Alameen. Jazakallah khair again, Sheikh Anwar. Looking forward to inshallah seeing you in a few
Allah.
weeks in Memphis. And Jazakallah khair everyone for joining. Inshallah, I will have the recording up within a few days. Please do share wide. I think the advice and the insight Sheikh Anwar gave us, I really wish every person I met was here right now. I wish everyone can hear this because it's so important. And honestly, this is what we need to talk about to get rid of, to really unite, the Muslim community and get rid of these subconscious biases and subconscious racism that a lot of us have in us, right? And these subconscious, I guess, wounds, right? That a lot of us have in us. Please do forward the video to everyone, inshallah, when it releases. And inshallah, jazakumullah khair again for your time. And be on the lookout for our next podcast. Again, on a very sensitive and touchy subject, inshallah, but details to come. With that, jazakumullah khair, everyone. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.